If you were to ask me what my favorite other world slash dimension was in Toho, outside of Gensokyo, it would definitely be Makai, but that answer feels a bit strange to me because Makai's appearance differs quite a bit depending on if you're looking at PC98 Makai or Windows Makai. While PC98 Makai is very lively and there is quite a lot of information about it, Windows Makai is the complete opposite. It only appears once in all of Windows canon, and on top of that, Makai's appearance was very brief, and what little information we have on it is pretty different from PC98 Makai. So in this video, I want to propose how we can just merge the two Makais together with retconning as little as possible of Makai's lore, so I can feel a bit less awkward when saying that Makai is my favorite alternate world slash dimension in Toho. And just to clarify, this is sort of an expansion of the Bringing Back PC98 characters video from a few months ago. While that video briefly went over Makai and all the characters that reside in it, this video will be elaborating much more on that. Also, you don't have to watch that video before watching this, unless you really want to. So the best thing to do first is to go over the PC98 Makai to see what we are dealing with before comparing it to Windows Makai. Makai first appears and highly responds to the prayers, where some demons destroy the Hakurei shrine, and depending on what you choose, the culprit behind the attack is either from Hell or Makai, and we're only going to be going over the Makai route here. The first place Reimu goes to is the Gate of Makai, where she fights Yugen Magon. After that, she goes to the ruins of Vinya and fights Elitz. And lastly, Reimu goes to the Fallen Temple and fights Sairiel. So overall and highly responsive, we see a few locations and characters, but since there isn't really any plot to that game outside the shrine getting destroyed, there really isn't that much useful information here, but I will still try to fit it in as best I can later on. Makai's next appearance is in Story of Eastern Wonderland, where in Stage 3, Reimu travels to the world of fantasies, which is the border between Gensokyo and Makai, and the last two stages take place at Reimiden, and that's all there really is to Makai in this game. Now onto the real meat and potatoes of Makai, Mystic Square, which is a game that really fleshed out Makai. The story of Mystic Square is that a bunch of demons from Makai are going on vacation to Gensokyo, and Reimu doesn't like that, so she goes to beat up the person behind the travel agency. The first stage in Mystic Square is located at the cave in which the door to Makai is said to be. Reimu fights Sara here, who is the gatekeeper of Makai, before going further. Reimu then flies to the border between Gensokyo and Makai and fights Louise here, who is a demon who is planning on going to Gensokyo. Stage 3 is the first stage that's fully in Makai, and the exact location of the stage is in Makai City, and you fight Lolly Alice here. The next stage takes place in the world of ice and snow, and you fight Yuki and Mai here. After that is Stage 5, which takes place in Pandemonia, where you first encounter Shinki, but Yumiko steps in and fights Reimu. In Stage 6, Reimu learns that Shinki is the creator and ruler of Makai, and also approved of the demons going to Gensokyo. Reimu then fights Shinki, and after defeating her, Shinki puts an end to the tourist agency, but in Reimu's ending, it is shown that the demons didn't listen to Shinki and managed to get to Gensokyo on their own. There is also the Extra stage in Mystic Square, which is located in Wonderland, which is also located in Makai, but it seems very similar to Makai City from Stage 3. And with that, we have gone over all the notable appearances of Makai in PC98, so now it's on to Makai in Windows Canon. So far in Windows canon, Makai has only appeared in Undefined Fantastic Object, where after a series of events that a certain wind goddess may or may not have started, a group of yokai go to free their master who was sealed away in Makai long ago. In UFO, Reimu goes to Makai via the Palaqueen ship, and she's able to break the seal to Hokai, which is the location Byakuran was imprisoned in. Reimu then fights Byakuran, and after their fight, they all leave Makai. Oh, and Makai actually has made one other appearance in Windows canon, in double spoiler, but it seems like all it is that the Makai stage backgrounds are reused in that game, and there doesn't seem to be any story implications, so I'm not going to bother with Makai's appearance in that game. While that's it for Makai's appearance in Windows canon, there are a few more things that are worth mentioning about Windows Makai. In UFO, it is stated that Makai is very dangerous. The landscape is harsh and unearthly, and there is toxic miasma everywhere. And while these conditions make it almost impossible for any ordinary human to survive in, all of it strengthens magical spells and makes it easier to learn magic here. A few last things to mention. While they do not appear in UFO, it is stated that Makai is full of demons, similar to how it is in PC-98. Maratsa states that Hokai is located in a corner of the infinite area of Makai, which doesn't make sense, but I will take this as Makai is at least theoretically infinite. Sakuya mentions before that Makai is scarier than hell, which implies that Sakuya has been to or at least knows quite a bit about Makai. And in addition to this, when Makai is first brought up in UFO, Reimu and Marissa seem to be familiar with Makai, which again implies that they have been there before, but Sanai seems unfamiliar with Makai, which of course means that she has never been there before. And that is it for Windows Makai. So now we can finally start talking about how we can merge Windows Makai and PC-98 Makai. Now while UFO doesn't mention or reference PC-98 Makai much, there really isn't much that retcons what was established in PC-98. In fact, Stage 5 and 6 of UFO take place in and above Hokai, which is the location that no known Makai resident is known to reside in. In addition to this, Hokai seems to not possess miasma, and personally, I like to think that the residents of Makai actually like miasma, and because of this, they do not like Hokai, although there isn't any canon support to that, since miasma was never mentioned in PC-98, but this is where the first change comes in to fit in PC-98 Makai. I would assume that at least the majority of Makai is covered in miasma, but the residents are fully immune to it and are able to live comfortably in it. Now let's talk about geography for Makai. So first off is the area between Gensokyo and Makai, and in Mystic Square, the area seems almost like space, being a black void layered with small star-like lights, and in Eastern Wonderland, the area between Gensokyo and Makai, which again is called the World of Fantasies, seems to be in what I can only imagine as some sort of cave, which doesn't really help, but in Stage 4, the background starts out as a black void with stars, similar to how the area between Gensokyo and Makai was depicted in Mystic Square. So I like to think that Stage 3 of Eastern Wonderland was still located in Gensokyo, right in front of Makai, while Stage 4 takes place between Gensokyo and Makai. Now that we know what the area between Gensokyo and Makai is like, what does the beginning of Makai look like? Well, in Mystic Square, the first location of Makai is Makai City, but it's not known just how far into Makai it is. But you know how I mentioned that the beginning of Stage 4 in Eastern Wonderland looked a lot like the area between Gensokyo and Makai? Well, later in Stage 4, blue crystal-like platforms appear, which remind me a lot of Pandemonia, and while I'm not saying that I think Pandemonia is located here, I do think that the crystal-like architecture you see here is just how architecture Makai looks like. When you fight Alice in Mystic Square, the background turns into a natural landscape, which is apparently all made of crystal, so I'm assuming that at least one of the abundant resources in Makai is crystal. So I believe that both Pandemonia and the location of Stage 4 in Eastern Story are both made of crystal, which explains why they look so similar. Now I still don't know what the location from Stage 4 is, but I still assume that this is what the beginning of Makai looks like. Also, Genji refers to this place as Raimuden, so I guess that is what we can call the beginning of Makai. Next location is Makai City, which I will assume is located further into Makai compared to Raimuden. And now we don't know much about Makai City, but I would assume that this is a city where some of Makai's residents live, since it seems that most of the humanoid residents don't seem that much different from normal humans. Also in Hokai in UFO, there does seem to be some sort of city in the distance. This could be Makai City, or can just be another random city in Makai. Also, I consider Wonderland to be part of Makai City in some way, since they look so similar. Now we have the world of ice and snow, which I'm assuming is just some sort of biome or location in Makai that is presumably covered in ice and snow. Also, ice and snow are made of crystal, which does support the whole Makai has an abundance of crystal thing I mentioned earlier. Now before we finish the Mystic Square locations, let's quickly go over the highly responsive locations. First is the ruins of Vinya, which just seems to be some hills, and I just assume this is a similar landscape to what we'd see during Alice's fight. And the last location from Highly Responsive is the Fallen Temple, which is probably just a temple that was built in Makai, and I will go over this location a bit more when I talk about the characters in Makai. Now we can finally go over Pandemonia, which is the location that Shinki resides in. Pandemonia is a structure that seems to be made of crystal, just like I said earlier, and other than that there isn't that much information on it. But something interesting is that Shinki says to Murta that there is no next, which implies that Pandemonia is located on the edge of Makai. But as we know, this doesn't make sense if Makai is infinite as stated in UFO. Now if we are to go with the idea that Makai is infinite, then I'd like to assume that Pandemonia is located in the center of Makai, which doesn't make total sense, but Makai has a corner, then it can have a center. And this could somewhat explain what Shinki said about there being no next. If Marissa was just trying to get as deep into Makai as she could, then the center would be the deepest. So there it's no next if your goal is to try to get it as deep into Makai as you can. Now there is one more location in Makai, which is the burning city we see during Shinki's fight. And I don't really have much to say about this other than that it's just a random weird location in Makai. Now while we have talked about all the notable locations in Makai, we should talk about the entrance to Makai, or rather the entrances. Makai has 3 notable entrances. In Highly Responsive, there's a portal that leads to Makai. In Mystic Square, we have the cave in which the door to Makai is said to be, and in UFO, we have the Palaqueen ship, which is able to pass over to Makai. So it is a bit weird that we have multiple entrances to Makai, but I think that's fine. Although I do like to just combine the entrances from Highly Responsive and Mystic Square together, since as far as I know, the entrance to Makai in Toho 1 seems to be in or around the Hakure Shrine, and the entrance in Toho 5 is in a cave in the mountains behind the shrine. Now the only problem with that last location is that the Hakure barrier is located somewhere around the shrine, probably behind it, so I just like to think that there is a bit of space between the shrine and the barrier where some small mountains are, and that is where the gate to Makai is. Now in Toho 5, the entrance to Makai just seems like it is in a cave, but there doesn't seem to be a proper portal or gate to it. So I just like to put the gate portal thingy from Toho 1 there, and if you do something to the gate, the portal to Makai, or at least the space between Gensokyo and Makai, will appear. Also, another little thing I want to add. So I know how earlier I talked about Stage 4 Eastern Wonderland being the space between Gensokyo and Makai rather than being directly in Makai. Well, if we still go with that, then that would mean that Stage 3 will be located at the entry to that location. And if we take a look at what Stage 3 is like, it looks like a cave. So there you go, it all fits nicely together. Now to wrap up the geography section, here's a map of Makai put together to help you visualize what I just said. So we have the Hakure Shrine at the start with the Hakure Mountains behind it, and in there is a cave in which the door to Makai is said to be, and in there is a gate portal thingy from Toho 1, and when entering that, you go through the space between Gensokyo and Makai, and once you're fully in Makai, the first place you would see is Ramadan. Further into Makai, you have Makai City, and I put the Crystal Valley behind Makai City since you see it right after you're in Makai City. And I also put the ruins of Vinya there, since they are kind of similar, and if you were to keep going through there, you will get to the Fallen Temple. But if you keep going through the original Crystal Valley, you will end up in the world of ice and snow, and somewhere beyond that is Pandemonia, which is the center of Makai. And lastly, you have the Burning City and Hokai. The Burning City can probably just go anywhere, as well as Hokai, but I guess Hokai at least needs to be in a corner of Makai. So now that we're finally done with the geography, we can move on to the characters in Makai, and this is the part that will probably overlap the most with the Bringing Back PC98 characters video. But like I said earlier, I'll be going more into detail with the Makai characters here, and this time I'll actually go over all the Makai characters, even the ones I don't think will ever come back. So first, let's talk about the ruler of Makai, Shinki. Shinki is the one who created Makai and is the god of it, which can stay the same here. Although one problem with her that doesn't set well with me is that in Mima's route in Mystic Square, Mima describes Shinki as weak, like laughably weak, which seems weird to me. I would think that the sole god of a world of demons would be strong, especially when we factor in the Windows part of Makai, like toxic gases, Makai being infinite. I would think that the god of a place like that would be very powerful and scary, so I propose that Shinki should be much stronger if she comes back. Not Watatsuki's sister strong, but strong enough to give other powerful characters a run for their money. Another part of Shinki I want to talk about is her relationship with Alex. It is said that Shinki created all the beings in Makai, and Alex does appear in Mystic Square, which may imply that Shinki created her, but that would not line up with Alex's portrayal in Windows canon, since in Windows canon, Alex is a human who turned herself into a yokai, whereas if Alex was created by Shinki, then she would have been born a yokai. So as much as I absolutely adored the fanon depiction of Shinki being Alice's mother, it is more likely that Alice was just a magician training in Makai, and that information from before about Makai making it easier to practice magic even supports that theory. Now to Shinki's maid, Yumiko. Yumiko will not have to be changed much, if at all. She can still be Shinki's demon maid. Now we have Yuki and Mai, who are witches that reside in Makai. Since they are witches and not demons, I don't know for sure if Shinki created them or not, but I don't think that matters too much. They can just be residents of Makai, although there is a problem with Mai being her name, since there is a character from Windows canon that has the name Mai, and the best solution for this is to just change Mai's name. In fact, someone by the name Clockwork Cake commented on my Bringing Back PC98 characters video, and they suggested that Mai's name should be changed to Maiko, with Yuki calling her Mai as a nickname. I really love the idea, and I think that is the best thing to do with Mai's name if she ever does come back. Now I have Louise, who can just be another resident of Makai. Also, I like to think that she lives in Makai City, and I have nothing else to add to that. And lastly, from Mystic Square, we have Sara, who is the gatekeeper of Makai. I like to think that she shows up at the gate of Makai whenever someone opens up the portal from Gensokyo, or in the space between Gensokyo and Makai, and tries to chase away anyone who seems too weak to be in Makai. Also, I would assume she doesn't keep track of other entry points to Makai, since she didn't appear in Stage 5 of the UFO, since the protagonist got there through the Palaqueen ship. Now we have the highly responsive characters, starting out with Yugen Magon, who I still have no clue as to what they are supposed to be, but they can just be some weird demon thingy that resides somewhere in Makai. Now before I talk about Elitz, I should probably talk about Sabriel first. So I want to go with my headcanon depiction of Sabriel, where she used to be an angel from heaven but was banished to Makai for gaining a lust for power, and is now imprisoned within the fallen shrine until the end of time. And I do still like this depiction, since while Toho is mainly based on East Asian religions, especially Shinto, I would still like it if more European or Western religions were depicted in Toho once in a while. So I propose that Makai can be a place that takes inspiration from its other religions, while Gensokyo can still be where all the Eastern religions go. In fact, Makai already has a few Western religion influences in it, or at least influences from Christianity. Makai only has one god, though Judaism and Islam have that too, but you also have the giant cross in the fallen temple, and even the canon information we have on Sabriel seem to be heavily based on Christianity. So in the future, if Zune ever gets inspired to put something from Western religion or culture into Toho, he can just throw it into Makai, and don't worry about this making Toho too Western. Makai will probably just appear every once in a while, like Hell or Formal Hell, so it's not like all the Western stuff is going to be very prevalent in Toho. Now let's get back on track and finally talk about Elitz, who I just like to imagine as being the gatekeeper to the fallen temple, since you do fight her before you enter the temple, but if not that, then she can just be another demon resident of Makai. Oh yeah, there's Ayana, who I forgot to mention in the Mystic Square part. I guess she can just be another Makai resident, and you do see her in Pandemonia, so maybe she works there? I don't know, there's so little information on her. Anyway, that's all I have to say for this video, and before anyone clicks off the video, I want to mention that I have a Twitter. I just post fun or interesting Toho stuff, and some non-Toho stuff, once in a while on there, as well as behind the scenes stuff and even some access for my videos. For example, by the time this video has been posted, I just posted that Makai map I made, so you can get that image there if you want it. You can also ask me questions there or give me ideas for future videos, so check out my Twitter if you are interested in any of that. Anyway, I do hope that Makai does get expanded on more in Windows Canon. It doesn't have to be the exact way I described it here, though I would love it if at least Shinki came back. I also don't care much how Makai gets expanded on, whether it be through the games or the manga, though I would like it best if Makai got a big role in another Toho game, similar to Mystic Square. But I think I've said enough now, so thank you for watching, goodbye.